Welcome everybody to Niners Now. I'm your host Brady Grustas at Grustas Brady on X. You can follow me there. And today we've got some breaking 49ers news. I also want to talk about some of the biggest position battles facing the 49ers this summer at training camp. What should we be focusing in on during the preseason and during summer practices? Who's competing for a starting spot? Who's competing for a roster spot? And stick around until later in the show when we continue our roster ranking series. Before we begin, go ahead and subscribe down below, leave a like, leave a comment, and let's get into it. So 49ers training camp begins today, Tuesday, when you will be seeing this video. But over the weekend, the 49ers made one final roster move, releasing safety George Odom. Odom was the primary backup at safety, as well as being a special teams starter. This is yet another core special teamer from last year who's gone under the new Brant Boyer regime. According to Ian Rappaport, Odom had elbow surgery last month and is expected to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. It's kind of a long time. Odom is definitely a candidate to sign somewhere mid-season once he's nice and healthy, and that could even be back in San Francisco. But in the meantime, the 49ers save $1.7 million in cap space and open up a roster spot right before training camp. So who takes his spot as that special teams safety? Is it Richie Grant? Is it Saron Neal? Maybe Marcus Siegel? I'm also pretty curious to see what the 49ers do with the available roster spot. Do they bring in another safety to compete? Maybe bring in a wide receiver? On Monday, the team worked out a big group of free agent wide receivers. The most notable names are Equanimeous St. Brown, Quintez Cephas, Grant Dubose, and Brandon Powell. I don't mind Equanimeous St. Brown. He's a big body, pretty decent run blocker. Cephas doesn't really do it for me, hasn't shown very much. I liked Grant Dubose coming out of college. I thought it was a pretty good player. Played for the Charlotte 49ers, could be a 49er to 49er connection. Most recently played in Miami. And Brandon Powell I thought was a pretty decent role player for the Minnesota Vikings for a couple years. Besides wide receivers, though, I could even see another defensive lineman join this team. Those are some spots that they're not super deep at edge. Especially. I assume we'll hear fairly soon about who's going to take that spot, so subscribe and check back in when that news inevitably drops. So on to the position battles. When I think of position battles, I am immediately thinking of the linebacker room. There's competition all the way up and down the roster. Obviously, Fred Warner is guaranteed to start, as he should be. He's the best linebacker in the league. But next to him, D. Winters likely has the inside track to start. All the buzz is that the 49ers love D. Winters. But Nick Martin, the third-round pick, will certainly be pushing Winters for that spot. And don't count out former seventh-rounder Tatum Bethune, who played a bit in garbage time snaps last year. Even if Winters does win the second linebacker battle, you still have Martin and Bethune competing for LB3. So between those three guys, there are 2 spots available on the depth chart. And below them, it's an all-out brawl. The 49ers usually like their depth linebackers to play a good bit of special teams. And they brought in veteran special teamer Luke Gifford to fill that role this year. Competing with Gifford will be Curtis Robinson, who was a preseason standout last year. But then you've got former draft pick Jalen Graham, as well as Chaz Surratt, who is very familiar with Saleh from their time in the Jets organization. I struggle really to see a world where all 3 of Gifford, Robinson, and Surratt make this roster. They're all kind of that special team / depth linebacker type of player. And that's not even counting Jalen Graham and that undrafted free agent, Stone Blanton, who got more guaranteed money than any UDFA the 49ers signed this year. The 49ers usually carry 5 or 6 linebackers on their 53-man roster, so if you exclude Fred Warner, you've got 8 linebackers: D. Winters, Nick Martin, Tatum Bethune, Luke Gifford, Curtis Robinson, Chaz Surratt, Jalen Graham, and Stone Blanton. All those guys competing for either 4 or 5 spots. And the better they play, the more playing time they can seriously earn. I mean, with position battles, usually a player's role is a little bit capped, right? Like, even if you win your position battle at cornerback, you're probably not going to be playing over Diamador Lenore or Renardo Green, right? Like, there will be a competition for the third cornerback spot this year, but there isn't really a competition for CB2 or CB1. But at linebacker, if any of these guys play well enough, I truly believe that nearly any of them could end up starting games next to Fred Warner this season. The next camp battle that I want to talk about is the defensive tackle group. This is another position where I think just about anybody could get the starting job. Ooh. The incumbent players they weren't very impressive last year, but they all know the system better than those incoming talented rookies. If I had to guess, I would say Kevin Givens and Jordan Elliott will probably have the inside track to start, at least for now. Givens has always been this sort of solid rotational pass rusher for this team, but he's never really had to take a step up and really take on a starting role. I'm curious to see if the coaches think that he's ready for that, or if he'll kind of have the same role he's always had and the same role he's been effective in for years. There's also Jordan Elliott, right? I'm not a huge fan of Elliott. He was brought in last year as a free agent, and he didn't play great last year. He has this habit of kind of just blindly shooting through the line of scrimmage, and every once in a while that ends up in a quarterback pressure, but more often than not, the offensive line can adjust and teams are able to run the ball right by him. The coaches seem to like Elliott a lot, though, and he played quite a bit, so for now I think he enters training camp as the starter. There's also Evan Anderson, who I thought showed the most promise of the returning defensive tackles this year. After signing as an undrafted free agent last year, Anderson showed some flashes as a run defender and even a nice play or two as a pass rusher. Apparently, though, Anderson is being coached hard at OTAs, especially by Chris Kasarik, who's chewed him out a couple of times. Hopefully, Anderson can avoid a sophomore slump and really make an impact this season. If he wants to avoid the doghouse, he'll have to show up to training camp ready to roll. So Givens, Elliott, and Anderson are all veterans who I think will be competing definitely to start week one. But they will have their hands full with these talented rookies, man. Second rounder Alfred Collins and fourth rounder CJ West. Collins just ended his holdout last week, so we will hopefully finally get to see him practice for the first time. He was in attendance but did not practice during minicamp or OTAs thanks to the holdout. So this will be the first time that we see Alfred Collins practice for this team. The 49ers could really use a guy like Alfred Collins, this big, huge mountain of a run defender. And luckily for them, they have Collins, and they also got my guy CJ West. West is one hell of a run stuffer as well, and I think he's immediately going to push Givens, Elliott, and Anderson for their snaps, especially when it comes to those early downs, 1st and 10s, obvious running situations, right? I've said it before on this show, but I expect CJ West to be a starter for this team by week one, and that all starts here in training camp. So you've got the incumbents fighting for any snaps that they can get, and you've got West pushing them immediately, Collins hopefully following not too far behind as he gets acclimated to the NFL, and then behind those guys is Kalia Davis, a former draft pick who really had some juice in college but hasn't made an impact in the league at all, as well as UDFA pass rush specialist Sebastian Valdez. The Niners tend to keep 5 defensive tackles on roster, so I think the likely cuts are Kalia Davis and Sebastian Valdez. But the rest of those 5 should all be in a heated battle to see who actually plays real snaps for this team. Any combination of Givens, Elliott, Anderson, West, and Collins could be the week 1 starters, and I wouldn't be surprised by it at all. I cannot wait to see who rises to the occasion, and I can't wait to see how these rookies do going up against some of these veterans. Now let's take a look at one more position that I think is going to have a really interesting camp battle this summer. I could bring up the safety group or the wide receiver group, and we've discussed both of them on the show, but I want to go in a different direction. Let's talk about the offensive line, specifically the backup offensive linemen. On this show, you're getting all the 49ers coverage. I pledge to not ignore offensive line here on Niners Now, not even the backups. To me, the starting lineup seems like it's mostly pretty locked in. From left to right, you've got Trent Williams. I assume Ben Bartch is going to be the starter at left guard. You've got Jake Brendel, Dominic Pooney, and Colton McKivitz. And I guess you could argue that Bartch is not locked in at left guard, especially after appearing on the NFI list. But he is my bet to win that job. I still believe in Ben Bartch. Behind then, though, the 49ers usually keep 4 backups at O-line. Sometimes it's less than that, but we're going to be generous today. We're going to say it's 4 offensive linemen. I think there are 8 guys on this team that could easily win one of those 4 backup spots. At offensive tackle, you've got Austin Pleasants. Pleasants played pretty poorly for the 49ers last year in a very small sample size, about 2 games. And then you've got Andre Dillard, who's a former first-round pick who didn't work out with the Titans last year, and you're not working out on one of the worst offensive lines in the league. That usually means there's something wrong. The upside with both Dillard and Pleasance is still high, though, I would say. Pleasance is a huge dude with legit athleticism, and apparently at OTAs, he's taken a big step forward in his game. Remember, he was signed off the street very late in the season, played a couple of games for the 49ers in a time where everybody was hurt. If you remember, the games where Austin Pleasance played, it was him and Charlie Heck as the two starting tackles. Who's Charlie Heck, you ask? That is an awesome question. No longer on the team. It's not like they put Pleasance in a great position to succeed, though. With a full offseason with the team, learning the playbook, learning the plays, refining his game, I could totally see a big improvement from Pleasance. He has the stuff that you can't teach, so if you can teach him the rest, I think he could be a sneaky, big, contributor for this team. Pleasance is certainly in that category, in that conversation to win the swing tackle job. And you talk about Andre Dillard, this guy went in the first round. He's got talent. And he played pretty decent in Philly for a while before sort of trailing off, spending some time in Tennessee where he didn't play great, and then was a backup for the Packers last year. I think those two will probably be competing against each other for that primary backup spot at offensive tackle. However, wild card here, they'll also have to hold off Spencer Burford. Now, again, if you remember, back in the real dark days of the season last year, with that unreal run of injuries at offensive line, Burford actually had to step in and play a couple snaps of left tackle for this team. And while it was a very small sample, I thought he played pretty good. Better than he did at guard, right? The coaches have hinted that he may get some more tackle reps this offseason, and I'm hoping that happens. He was drafted out of UTSA as a tackle, and I'd like to see if he's better at his natural position. We saw Colt McKivitz have a pretty similar career arc to Burford so far. Both drafted as tackles. They both moved to guard. Really struggled. McKivitz was actually cut from the team before re-signing later. But then McKivitz moved back to tackle, and now he's succeeding and is obviously a starter. If Burford can win that swing tackle job, I'd be really impressed, and I think that would be a huge development for him and for the team. But even if he's just like a versatile backup who can play a little bit of tackle and a little bit of guard, I bet he makes this roster. That is a valuable piece to have on your team, right? A backup who can play 4 of the 5 spots on the offensive line. At guard, speaking of guard, you also have Nick Zakelj, who's been on the roster for a while, and Matt Hennessy, who was a starter in Atlanta for a few years before signing with the 49ers around December last year. Both of those guys have some flexibility and some experience playing center, and I think that they'll be competing with each other to be the primary interior backup as a guy who can play guard and play center in a pinch. But they may face a little bit of competition from the young guys, the guys behind them. Connor Colby, the rookie, drafted in the 7th round this year. Drew Moss was just signed as an undrafted free agent out of Colorado State. And Drake Nugent was a UDFA last year who spent the year on the practice squad. And he had a bit of buzz after playing for Jim Harbaugh's championship Michigan squad. Colby, Moss, and Nugent are all really nice scheme fits. They're young athletic players on the interior, and they are ascending. They've got their arrows are trending up, right? Zakelj and Hennessy certainly have more experience and I think are probably better right now than those 3 youngsters, but I wonder if we see a big jump from one of the young guys and they end up stealing a spot from the veterans. Like I said, there's only 4 spots for this whole group of guys. Austin Pleasance, Andre Dillard, Spencer Burford, Nick Zakelj, Matt Hennessy, Connor Colby, Drew Moss, Drake Nugent. Only 4 of those guys are going to make this team. Half of the group is missing out on the 53-man roster, and I'm going to be watching the offensive line closely when preseason rolls around. So there's your overview of some of my most anticipated position battles for this summer. The linebacker group, the D-tackle group, and the backup O-line positions. Let me know down in the comments which battles you're most excited to watch, and let me know if I missed a big one that you're keeping your eye on. Now let's move on to yet another installment of the roster ranking series, where I use my own opinions to rank every single member of the 49ers 90-man roster, and I give a little overview of each player. If you disagree with any of my rankings, be sure to comment down below and tell me why. Today's group of players is part of a larger tier of guys who I think have a shot to make the 53-man roster, but likely will not play a whole lot of snaps if they do. These are definitely the bench caliber guys you don't want to start more than a game or two, but they're good enough to contribute, and in some cases they're good enough to make the team. So let's get started with number 68. That's wide receiver Russell Gage. Gage is a veteran wide receiver who's been in the league since 2018 and spends most of his career with the Atlanta Falcons. He was a pretty productive role player back in 2020, 2021, starting roughly half of his games and breaking 700 yards in each of those seasons. Since then, though, his productivity's definitely taken a step back. He spent last year on the Niners practice squad, did not play in a regular season game. I think Gage is still a talented guy, but with how crowded the receiver position is, I think it's more likely that he ends up either on the practice squad or just cut completely. At number 67, I've got undrafted free agent guard Drew Moss out of Colorado State. We just mentioned him earlier. Moss certainly could have been drafted, in my opinion. He's a smooth moving run blocker who shows some flashes of a decent anchor and as a nice pass protector. Not great, but nice. The big question with Moss, for me, is will his athleticism translate to the NFL level? NFL defensive linemen are the best of the best. They are freaky athletes, some of the most athletic people on the planet. Can Moss block those guys as easily as his opponents at Colorado State? We will see this summer. Speaking of athleticism, at number 66 is wide receiver Isaiah Neyor. Neyor was signed as a UDFA this year after ending his college career with Nebraska. And Neyor is a height, weight, speed beast. He's 6'4", 218 pounds, and he ran his 40-yard dash in 4.4 seconds flat. That is a great time, especially for a dude that size. And in OTAs, the 49ers saw his deep ball ability up close and personal. He had a couple of highlight catches in OTAs and in minicamp. The issue, though, with Neyor is that he doesn't really produce in college whatsoever. He had one nice year for Wyoming back in 2021, but after 6 years in college, his best season ever was 44 catches, 878 yards, and 12 touchdowns. That's a good year. It's definitely a good year. It's a lot of touchdowns. Nice job. But he was never able to top that, which is pretty concerning. Neyor's athleticism is automatically going to make him a sneaky candidate to make this team. I mean, you just can't teach that type of athleticism. But he will have to be way more productive this summer than he has been in college in order to make an impact and have a real chance at making this team. Number 65 is the man, the myth, the legend, Dwelly time, tight end Ross Dwelley. He took a little hiatus from this team last year before the 49ers brought him back in May. Maybe missing Dwelley was the reason that the team was so bad last year. Who knows? Dwelley is a solid pass-catching tight end who doesn't give you much as a blocker, and I think he'll be in competition for that third tight end job, which he held for a long time for this team. It should honestly be named the Ross Dwelley role in his honor, especially if he can win that job once again this season. At 64, I have cornerback Trey Avery. Avery was claimed off waivers last year by the 49ers after he played 9 games with the Titans and was cut. Avery is I would say, solid backup nickel cornerback. He kind of struggles when you move him outside, but he's a willing tackler, and he uses that mentality to be a solid special teamer as well. Avery is pretty much just a depth option at this point, but I could see the 49ers wanting a veteran option at slot corner if they end up starting the rookie Upton Stout. At number 63 is the 7th round draft pick, guard Connor Colby. Colby is pretty comparable to Drew Moss, who we just talked about earlier. He's a nice run blocker, and while he doesn't hang his hat on pass blocking, he'll show you a flash of some good anchor from time to time. Iowa, however, plays in the Big Ten, which means that Colby's level of competition was definitely higher than Moss's. Iowa also runs a pretty similar offense to the 49ers, so he's not only a scheme fit, but he's pretty familiar with what Coach Chris Forster will be asking him to do. I'm hoping that Colby can stick on this roster, at least on the practice squad, unlike former late-round pick Jarrett Kingston. Oh, I love Jarrett Kingston. I don't know if any of you guys remember him. Late-round pick out of USC. Truly, for me, he was the one who got away. I hope he's succeeding in Carolina or wherever he ended up. But we're not talking about Jarrett Kingston. We're talking about yet another offensive lineman. Number 62, a guy that we talked about earlier in this episode. It's tackle Austin Pleasants. Now, Pleasants has been in the NFL since 2020, but barely. He was undrafted in the 2020 draft, but he spent time with the Jaguars and Panthers, plus 2 stints with the Chargers, 2 stints with the Cardinals, and 2 stints with the Bears before coming to the 49ers. Needless to say, this guy is looking for a long-term home. And after he finally got a chance to start games with the 49ers last year, he played well enough to get a 1-year deal and come back to San Francisco for this summer. Didn't play great, but well enough to come back. Pleasance is huge. He's 6'7", he's 330 pounds, but he can still move. This guy can scoot. And that's rare. Even if, if Coach can get if Chris Forrester, can get the best technique out of Austin Pleasance, then the 49ers may have another hidden gem on their hands. Austin Pleasance, to me, is one of the most interesting under-the-radar stories of the whole team, in my opinion. At number 61, I've got defensive tackle Jordan Elliott. Man, these are all the guys that we talked about in this episode. Elliott was not very good last year. PFF gave him below average grades for both pass rush and run defense, and honestly, based on watching him, I agree. But to show him a little bit of grace, he was a 3rd-round pick out of Missouri, and last year was only his first season in San Francisco. Maybe he just needs a little bit of time to acclimate to the new team, and maybe playing under a defensive coordinator who is not named Nick Sorensen will help. Elliott will definitely have a chance to earn a starting spot on this defensive line, so I expect us to find out just how good he really is this summer. And our last player that I want to cover today at number 60 is the kicker, Jake Moody. 49ers fans have some really strong opinions on Jake Moody, and for good reason. He is an odd player, man. It's just incredibly odd. He was drafted in the top 100, which is wildly high to take a kicker. He's got a huge leg, and for a brief time, he actually held the record for longest field goal in Super Bowl history before it was broken in that same game. I'm not going to talk about the Super Bowl too much, but Moody was horrendous last year. He was straight up kicking the 49ers out of games with his misses. Famously, he had Deebo Samuel all up in his face on the sidelines of the Buccaneers game. And I'm certainly not defending the play that we saw out of Jake Moody last year, but I think it's important to remember a couple things when it comes to this guy. The first is that every single other core special teamer has been let go. The coordinator, Brian Schneider, is gone. The long snapper, Tabor Pepper, is gone. The punter, Mitch Wishnowsky, is gone. One of the gunners, George Odom, is gone. Everybody but Moody has been completely cleared out. But Brant Boyer has signed on to lead this unit, and he is giving Moody a chance to prove himself. In May, Boyer said this about Jake Moody, quote, "There isn't a special teams coach in this league that didn't have him rated number 1 coming out that I know of. He's as talented of a kid as it gets," end quote. Boyer also mentioned that Moody fought some injuries last season, which is true. In Week 5 versus the Cardinals, Moody suffered a high ankle sprain, which kept him out for about a month. Before the injury, Moody was 13 of 14 on his field goal attempts, with his only miss being a 55-yarder. After he came back from the injury, he went 11 of 20 and tossed in a missed extra point as well. Clearly, that injury bothered him, going from 13 of 14 to 11 of 20. The Niners brought in some competition for Moody in kicker Greg Joseph, but it seems obvious to me that they are giving Moody another shot to impress this year. And for everyone's sake, I just hope that he can put it together. So that is it for the rankings today. Let me know who was too high and who was too low. Am I being too harsh on Moody, putting him all the way down at 60? Or was I too generous? Leave a like, leave a comment, and let me know if there's any topics you'd like to see me cover. Thank you all for watching, and subscribe for 49ers videos 5 days a week. I'm Brady Grustas, at GrustasBrady on X. This has been Niners Now, and I'll see you tomorrow.